Hello, Deep Mindfulness Collective. This right here, right now, is the black inky void of what happens when the camera breaks down and what does one do. So give me 1 second here, and I'm going to make sure the camera's working. This happens not infrequently when we begin here. Okay, what's happening? Give me 1 second. And now I just click 2 more buttons and it should be visible. How about that battery? Oh, I've seen this before. Okay, I know what's happening. Give me 1 second here. And this should do it. Try it one more time. Thanks for your patience, everyone. There we go. Look at that. Boom. We are in business. Folks, lovely to see you here. Welcome, everyone, as we begin to trickle in. Amused Dave. I think those are random letters. I'm not even going to try to read that. I think it might be totally inappropriate. Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to explore an Amused Dave. This is hello. This is by special request. We looked all over for this video that I was certain that I had made about values and what these values are, what they're for, how they function, how I use them in the way that I teach. Oh, it's Russian. Welcome. And so today we're going to actually make that video in case it doesn't exist because we couldn't find it. Okay, so folks, tell me where you're at. And what are you grateful for? What am I grateful for? Grateful for infinite times at bat that I get to try to have a lovely and rich, wonderful life over and over again. No matter how challenging it is, I get another chance to do it. Another chance to have a lovely life. Okay, let's see here. Amused Dave says, grateful for that I am healthy. I'm grateful that you are healthy too. Makes me very happy. Let's see. Jamler, what's up, Jamler? Good time to see you here. It's been quite some time. Let's see. From Kaiserslautern. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Let me read it more carefully. Kaiserslautern, Germany. Kaiserslautern, Germany. I've spent a little bit of time in a few places in Germany. Kaiserslautern was not one of them, but that's my mistake. I should have spent more time in Kaiserslautern. Oh, that's decent pronunciation. Kaiserslautern. I was amazed. I mean, I guess it was just foreign travel for an American, but I was amazed when I would go and I would say it's like, you get in a taxi and you'd be like, Hunterstrasse. And he'd be like, what? And I'd be like, Hunterstrasse. And he'd be like, I don't know if they're messing with you, but you're like, and then finally they'd be like, oh, Hunterstrasse. And you'd be like after trying for 10 minutes. But I think that's just the foreign language thing. Yes, exactly. So welcome, everyone. Welcome from Germany. Welcome from Sweden. Welcome from, well, I don't know if you're in Russia there, Amused Dave, but welcome. It needs to be A to Z perfect. Exactly. That's the only way I'll listen to your language. I do remember somebody was in, I mean, this is such a small difference, but I was in New York City where I live, and somebody was like, they came to me and they said, sushi? And I was like, I'm sorry, and sushi? Like they're looking around for something. And I was like, I want to help you. I really took some time. It's like, what do you, and they kind of finally after a while, they kind of made a shape and a thing, and they did this. And I was like, church? And they're like, sushi. I was like, okay. It's right there. There's the big cathedral right there. And it's like, oh yeah, it's right behind you. So, it happens. It happens, folks. we're all in a mixed up world. You know, we want to be kind to each other as much as we can. You know, I'm just going to put a plug in here. If anyone's rolling in, just let me know where you're at. What are you grateful for? We'll start meditating soon. I just want to put a plug in here for being kind and being of service to other people. It is such a delight. It's a pleasure, man. You get, I don't know, I get so much from it. The other day, this photo shoot next door that way. Sometimes photo shoots will buy so many flowers or so many plants or whatever, and then at the end of the day they don't need them, right? They give as many as they can to the crew, and then they just have buckets of extra flowers because they had some big, you've seen the photo shoots, all sorts of crazy stuff in the background. So there was this bin of, it had to be, 8 dozen roses at least. It was just like a giant, I can't even put both my arms in here. The bin was a big bin packed with like long stem roses. I can't even show you how they were, like very long stem roses. I didn't even know they got that long. It was like, 3 feet long or something. And so I was like, well, I'm going to bring these to my house. And I brought them to my house. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't have enough vases to whatever. So I just took a bundle, put them in a vase. It's like, I still have a ton of roses here. So I was like, you know what? It's like kind of a, like, gray, sort of lonely day. I was like, I'm going to give these away. And so I walked in Brooklyn, where I live, there's no one right there. So I walked a couple blocks, and I was just like, would you like a flower? And a lot of people were like, oh. But then a lot of people were like, oh yeah, let's have a flower. And the same question kept coming up, why are you giving these away? And I would say, do you like it? And they'd say, yes, I do. I was like, that's the reason I'm giving them away, which is funny to me. But afterwards, it probably took like 30 minutes. There's a lot of people. It felt great. Just feels so good. You know what I mean? Just helping people, just doing something for no reason. So if you ever want to boost, go volunteer, do something like that. It's really fun. So the point of it all is, I don't know why I have this urge. I want to zoom in a little. Boom. It's probably my classical fine art training where I'm like, the composition is just slightly, I guess I'm in a like storytelling mood. I was in art school, and this woman is a really amazing painter, did this self-portrait. It was of her. You couldn't really see her face, but it was this immaculate, beautifully painted. This is our first year, but she was just such an incredible painter. Rita Natarova, I think that might be her name. You could probably look up her artwork now. If somebody wants to look it up and put on a link, I'll put it on the screen. But she did this painting, and it was just beautiful, of herself in a kitchen. She did it like in a week for her homework or something. And we almost traded portraits. I was really excited to get this portrait, but at the end, she's like, no, I like it too much. So I was really bummed that I didn't get that one. But the teacher was like, is there anything wrong with this painting? Anyone see anything wrong? There's a problem here. And it's art school, so you have to do this kind of thing. And everyone's like, I don't know, it's a pretty good painting, whatever. And he's like, doesn't it seem like there's a lot of pressure on the left-hand side? And the figure was just like here, like in the composition, like if this canvas or this screen, the figure was here versus like here. And it was true. It was a little tight to the side. And so anyway, that's a lot of what art school was, is like fussing with like details like that. And it's like, what are you going to do? Like, it's painted already, but yeah, for the next one, I guess. Okay. Don't know why I'm like in a full-on storytelling mood, but the reason we're here, folks, is to meditate. We're going to meditate for 25 minutes, after which we're going to talk about our theme, which is how to choose a life path. What does that have to do with meditation? Well, it has everything to do with meditation from my perspective. A lot of what we're doing in choosing the kind of life we want is tuning into what we need internally, what's actually happening in our experience. And there's a lot of turmoil and, storm and drung happening. Strum and drung, now we have a little bit of extra German in there for Jamler. A lot of strum and drung going on inside, so it's hard at times to tell what is important to us, what's actually important. And so that's one of the reasons we need meditation, is to get clarity on that. Oh, do we find Rita's stuff? Nick, you're a champion. Is that a paint? Yeah, it probably is a painting. She's that good. Okay, I'm going to pull this up on screen too. Monitor 2. Let's see here. I want to show you this painting. Oops. Okay, I'm sure everyone's already opened the link already, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, monitor 2. Let's zoom in on this so you all can see it nice and nice. Anyway, this was my classmate. This, I think I might even know who this is, who the model was, but this, I don't think this is her. Maybe it's a self-portrait. You know, you never know. It doesn't look exactly. But this was the painter, my friend. The painting is done by my friend Rita Natarova. It looks like a photograph. It is not a photograph. It is hand painted. So this is the person I was talking about, who's like a really killer painter. Always was. Okay, let's kill that image and get to meditation. So folks, yeah, exactly. No, it's not a photo. Exactly. Grateful for not thinking about not thinking. Excellent. Okay, folks, we're going to meditate for 25 whole minutes. If you just want to come back to tune in to the other thing, that's going to be in about 25 minutes, so feel free to come back. But tell you what, you're going to have a lot more experiential understanding of what I'm describing here. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. So we're going to be doing the theme today, or the, what's it called? The theme we're going to be looking at today is how to choose a life path, and we're going to be looking at values and how they play into that. So we'll do a meditation based on that. But first, we have to choose what meditation would best serve. If I were saying, someone, I want to help you choose a life path, which meditation would I most likely pick to say this is the direction I would go? Okay. I'm going to pick that meditation. It's going to be a nurture positive meditation. Someone asked about that last time. And here's the instruction. This is the initial instruction. I might do something a little different partway through, but this is how the instruction is going to go. We're going to sit, we're going to feel the body, and we're going to try to, it's funny, it sounds very cheesy, but we're going to try to open the mind, meaning literally we're just including more in awareness rather than the sort of focused, pokey mind that zooms in on things. We're going to open to awareness, and then from that awareness, whatever arises, we're going to invite it. It's going to be very welcome, and we're going to say, either we could say welcome, or we could say, of course. And I like the term, of course. Of course. Any problem that arises is almost better if we're like, oh, I don't know, I'm frustrated, or I'm distracted, and I don't like that, or I'm judging. It's actually almost better, because when that arises, we say, yes, of course. Because of course the mind will get distracted. Yes, of course. I see. Of course. Over and over again, no matter what arises, we just simply say, of course. If that happens and we can't say of course, we're like, I don't like it, this doesn't work for me. Then to that we say of course. If anything happens, we just say of course. And so part of the process is to stay with that kind, welcoming awareness. And if we can't, then to that we say of course. The reason this is related to values is why. It's basically starting to recognize that the drives within us, the different pushes and pulls that guide us to one place or another, these are valid and they're natural. A lot of our challenge in life, choosing a path in life, is that we want to deny aspects of ourselves. We want to push those and suppress those down. We value some over others, and then we just want to press the ones we don't like down and value the other ones, but we get very out of whack that way. So only when we can see all of the different drives do we actually start to become more free. And in choosing a meditation path, we want to be able to do that generally. So find yourself a nice, comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. And when you're ready, I'm going to encourage folks to be still throughout the meditation. So find a position that you can maintain without having to use a lot of muscle power or hold yourself up. This usually requires that the knees are lower than the hips. You're balanced on the tailbones, and there's a balance point from the tailbone through the crown of the head. I'm going to encourage you to stay entirely still unless, of course, you feel overwhelmed. If you feel overwhelmed, go ahead and make any small adjustments or a big adjustment, or if you even like, you could even pause the meditation, just open the eyes or stop practicing if you need to. And we'll go from there. So folks, find that nice, comfortable position, and when you're ready, we will begin. beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths and just feeling the body rise and fall. Each time we begin a meditation, we begin with the momentum of all of the previous moments. So as we observe the body breathing for just a few moments, slowing down that momentum by attending to the sensations of this particular moment in great detail. Letting go of the breath, we're just going to sweep through the body to be sure we're not holding any undue tension. So relaxing the head, including the muscles behind the eyes, the back of the tongue. Letting the jaw go slack, no need to hold it closed. And letting the relaxation of the face, neck, throat, let that spread down to the neck and shoulders. Let the relaxation of the shoulders bleed down to the arms, to the wrists, and finally to the hands. Feeling all the rich sensations in the palms of the hands and tips of the fingers. Letting go of any attempt to control the breath, just letting the body breathe as it will. Noticing the natural tightening and relaxing of the upper chest and upper back as the breath comes and goes. Relaxing the belly and the lower back. Relaxing the hips and the upper legs. The knees and calves. The ankles, and relaxing the feet. And then tuning in to relax the entire body. All of the body all together. And the mind can either look at details, zooming into specific nuance, or it can take in an overall experience. So see if you can take all of the body's sensations as one package, as one collective cloud. Sometimes this is easy and sometimes it's challenging. If it's challenging, see if you can take in all experience. This seems like it would be even harder, but often It's just a matter of taking a kind of soft snapshot. Everything that's available in this moment as one collective haze, one cloud of sensation. If any particular detail pulls our attention, that's fine. Just introducing that detail back to the whole, back to the totality. Not worrying about trying to get every little detail in the totality, in the whole. Just whatever appears to awareness. Awareness is like a lantern shining in all directions, so whatever happens to appear. Because we're attending to the whole, the overall experience, all sensation. If we're still simply attending to the whole body, that's fine, or we can open up to everything. Because we're attending to the whole, distraction will come in the form of parts and pieces, details that zoom the mind in. So right now, simply assessing, is the mind easily holding the overall experience, or is it pulled into details? Either one is nature, not a problem. Simply being honest. Is the mind pulled towards specific thoughts or sensations? Is it resting in the totality, or is it somewhere in between? If we find the mind is drawn towards details, we can just simply label these as part. If we notice something that is a part, a section, a portion of all of our sensing, we simply introduce that part to all of the sense data around it until we find our way back to the whole. Over time, recognizing that every piece of sense data, the sensation in our left hand, a particular sound or thought, emotion, they are happening within a context. And that context is everything we can sense in this moment. Resting in the whole. If distracted, labeling it as part, introducing all the different sensations around it until we find our way back to the whole. Sometimes practicing this way can make us foggy because awareness can be soft, uncommitted to the usual edges of our perceptual world. So if we find we're getting drifty, feel free to allow the eyes to open and rest on a single point. Now we'll make a slight change. Staying with the whole as we have been, but adding a certain perspective, accompanied by words which support this perspective. That perspective is acceptance of whatever arises. The mind is pulled into a detail. The mind can rest in the whole. Whatever it is, we let go of our labels and we simply say, of course. Of course. Perhaps we say, welcome. Of course. Welcome. If we find that we've been distracted or drifted away, this means we've returned, and so we simply say, of course. Of course the mind wanted to explore. Of course the mind became unconscious, as it does at times, of course. Perhaps there's a sense of a viewer, of a meditator, or a sense of a witness, some type of self, some sense of me. This is obviously an example of a part, something that seems separate. So to that divided aspect, we say, of course. Remembering that our of course is inviting whatever we're connecting with back to the whole. And at some point we might get a sense that this perspective, of course, is a kind of view of all of our perceiving. It has its own flavor, as though we could rest in this perspective. Rather than it being something which comes in waves. Something appears, we say, of course, something appears over and over. It's actually something we can abide within. A kind of quality of awareness itself. This kind, welcoming nature of awareness. Awareness doesn't need anything to be different. Doesn't need to change anything that's occurring. And if there's any part of us that does want this moment to change, to be more or less like this or that, we welcome that, of course. Of course, there's clinging and aversion at times. How continuously can we stay with this way of knowing all of our experience? And if it's not very continuous, if it's quite bumpy, of course, whatever occurs is nature. It doesn't need to be different in any way. And if there's part of us that feels like it does need to be different, time needs to go faster, or we need to get to that to-do list, or we think we shouldn't be distracted. Of course the mind thinks this. Of course it wants to push and pull and change reality. That's part of the nature of the mind, of course. any sense that thought is important, or that our story, who we have been or what we plan to do at some future point, that this is relevant now, of course. If there's a sense of space, organizing all of our experience, our sense of time, of course, the mind produces these things. If there's any sense of inside or outside, self and world, subject or object, of course. If there's any sense of duality of any kind, it's not a problem. And simply say, of course, and invite it back to the whole. Staying with the practice, staying in stillness. If the eyes are closed, allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes. Eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open. Letting the spaciousness of seeing fold into the spaciousness of awareness. And in this way, letting this particular moment be the great teacher that shows us how we might bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay. So not letting go of that practice. Often we can sort of toss away the practice as soon as we end. So no, the practice hasn't ended. In fact, this is the beginning of the practice. This is the most important part, is to attend to your current experience as closely as you can. As this moment starts to bleed into our usual way of being, this is where we start to see the nuance of how we can actually bring this practice into every aspect of our life. It is also the time where you use those digits, my favorite digital technology, to write a report. Either write it down, or you can jump into the Discord and we will chit-chat like kitty cats. I want to do meditation reports before we talk about the theme of choosing a life path, because typically people's questions will be based around the last thing we did. So I'd rather we talk about the meditation itself than that we just talk about some conceptual themes that I could come up with that I find very useful, but it's the meditation itself that I want to talk talk about. So let us find ourselves a link here. Oh, we even have a question for stream. Oh. Okay. Looks like we already have somebody here in chat. I also have a question for stream. I'm curious about that. For about 2 hours. Wow, okay. So we have a report here from Vipassanizer, also known as something Dave, I forget who's here. I'm going to invite you to speak, Dave, so you can talk about what that meditation was like, what happened, and what you're like now.
Hello.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I like the part where in my room there was a lot of distractions, and I put it into awareness, and it felt good.
Nice. Yeah, so when you say you put it into awareness, it sounds like you're saying that you did kind of what we're describing, which is you invited that sensation into this larger experience. Is that correct?
Indeed.
Yeah. And so did you get a sense of, did that things, we talk about things maintaining their thingness. Did it feel like that distraction, it felt like usually distractions are objects. They're like, okay, this sound or this thing, something discrete. Did it feel like that maintained its thingness, or did it feel like that actually sort of collapsed into awareness?
Collapsed into awareness.
Yeah.
It also, when I was observing the part, I was observing the observing, and I put it also into awareness, and it felt like everything is happening by itself.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and so you can, I was going to say, you can, anything that is a thing, you can invite it into awareness and it breaks down. So this is something I think we've talked about. We talked to this a little bit about this when we did the impermanence section a little while ago. But basically, the mind breaks the whole world into objects, into nouns, and to allow that into awareness, which doesn't care about borders or edges in any way, starts to break all of that down. So there's these two ways the mind relates to the world, which is a bunch of objects. And if we just do that, it tends to be pretty painful, honestly. It's just like the world's divided, and then we have to fight to maintain the sort of primacy of one object over another, me being, the most important object that the mind creates. And what awareness does is just cut right through that. So one of the things that we can notice is if we go into nature, typically awareness has to be a little bit wider because nature itself has this sort of wide open spectrum quality. And you've maybe noticed when you're walking in nature, sometimes I'll get out to nature and I'll just be sort of tromping along a little while, and it'll feel as though I'm sort of like self-absorbed or sort of like in my own head. And at some point something sort of breaks and I'm like, oh, right, I'm in this place. And I start sort of looking at what's here. And what's happening there is a shift from my attention to my awareness. And often that feels very relieving. It's like, oh, I'm actually here. This is actually going on. I don't know if you've had that or similar experiences.
Yeah, I had some.
Excellent. Good times. Okay, well, thank you so much. Any other, anything else to report?
Not for now.
Oh, I see that. I'll say briefly that on the, you said you left this report on the 14th. I didn't get to this. You did the impermanence meditation after the session and for about 2 hours. Great. I'm glad. That's great dedication. And you felt like I achieved everything and there was nothing left to do. It lasted for about 10 seconds. That's great. That's great clarity. And also the fact that you are aware that it just lasted a little while, but it was still valuable. That's wonderful. Thank you for that report. And if there's any other detail there, let me know.
No.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to bounce you back here to the audience here. Excellent. If anyone else wants to pop in on the Discord, I think, did I even put the link out? I didn't even put the link out. That's how advanced my streaming capacity is. There's a link. If anyone else wants to chit chat there, let me know. I'm trying to get a thing where it'll make a ding when somebody enters, so I make a sound, but until then, I don't know. Okay. Any other reports or questions? Oh, Jamler says, feeling less resistant as well as feeling more alert. Hey, those are nice qualities, good times. It's funny, I'm staring over here at this photo, this image here. Let's see, before we begin with the whole theme, and as people are writing their reports. Oh, looks like my... Okay. Such a great painting. Okay, we'll talk. We'll listen to Solid for Life in 1 second, or we'll talk to hear your report. And just looking at this painting, I started practicing with my eyes open at some point. It was in the corner of my eye, and I kept being drawn to that. Sort of think about it. It's very powerful. I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. So often it's very hard to put something right in the middle. Can I point at this thing? No, I guess I can't. I can point towards it. Put something right in the middle of a canvas, and then actually have it be so that you can explore the entire canvas, because usually it's like too centered and then you can't go anywhere else. But the face is so striking, and then you sort of like, I wish I could, why can't I put, I guess that's not how cameras work. You can't put your hand over. I can put my mouse over, right? Yeah. How it's, there's this sort of like heavy arc, this like, and the heavy hair, this like beautifully rendered dense sort of hair. And then, obviously the premise is this person is standing in front of a painting, but this makes it possible for you, like it's a painting of a painting. So it makes it possible for you to explore this space of the artwork itself and like move across. It's a very classical, it's actually several classical compositions combined. The classic diagonal, which brings the eye across pretty quickly. There's also like the sort of the mountain, what is it called? Composition. That's like another, process here. Really great, beautifully divided. It's like divided this way. It's sort of a vertical cross, another classical composition. Really beautifully composed painting here. Just wanted to say that. Let's listen to what Solid for Life has to say. Where is my thing that talks to me so I don't have to think or read? Solid for Life says the following.
I just felt way more aware of everything just happening that I can't control.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a big wave of accepting and relaxation.
Excellent. That's one of the things with this practice that I think is so powerful, is it's so deeply powerful to just, whatever happens, we just simply say, of course. And I think we can say, yeah, I feel acceptance, but then a million things arise, and there's just this thing of saying, of course. That's of course it's going to happen, and there's nothing that doesn't fit within that. And so the conscious part of the mind can say, yeah, well, that's how it is. I'll just say, of course, and everything will be accepted. But there's all these sub-minds or parts of us that are occurring that will tend to say, nah, I want this or I want that. Any drive within us is going to be some aspect of us not wanting or wanting. So we're constantly pushed and pulled by these different drives, and that clinging and aversion can cause a lot of suffering. Honestly, we can have a lot of suffering from that. So, okay, let's jump in here. I want to jump into the theme that we want to talk about today. So let me just check if anyone's on Discord, waiting to chit chat. Okay, no. So in that case, let me clear the decks here. Let me lose that. And actually, I'm even going to lose the chat there so that my editor can happily have a blank canvas to work with. Okay, let me also pull out my notes that I took. Can this stand here? I doubt it can. I doubt that'll stand. I think it's going to fall right over. Oh, it did. Okay. So I wanted to discuss choosing a life path. And I want to emphasize that this is something that is an ongoing process. This is not something that we do once and then it disappears. And it takes the weight off, because there's always this sense of, I need to choose this giant life path, and how do I pick what I want to do with this kind of thing. But if we actually get clear on what our needs are, what our values are, and then start making decisions, making simple decisions, making big decisions based on that, we can actually shape a life sort of piece by piece, like water on a stone, rather than having to hammer away at something to make it the thing we want, not really knowing what we necessarily want. So the first thing to talk about is, why would we need to even do this in the first place? Why not just sort of be free, live our lives, do whatever we want? Well, we have to consider that wanting is a drive, right? I want things. The classic thing I always joke about is like, I want the new phone or the new gadget. I think I'm like a couple behind on phones. So I want the new gadget. and this is just a common thing, we see advertising is based on trying to get us to want a thing by using someone else's desire. We see someone else's desire, our system sort of takes over. Oh, that person's enjoying that hamburger, it makes us desire. Pretty standard stuff. But we have to remember, wanting is a drive. It is a natural, normal human drive. Early Buddhism says let's uproot that, let's get rid of it. Later Buddhism says let's transmute that into something transcendent. Latest stage Buddhism, 1,000 years ago, might say it's already awake. You can actually find everything you need in the craving itself. So craving is, from my perspective, is not our enemy. It shows us something very powerful about the nature of existing, and is something, to show us about awakeness, about what it means to be awake. So it's helpful, though, to look at the nature of craving. The craving gives us this sense that if we follow it, if we actually do the thing that it says, then we will finally be free, or we'll finally get the thing. And there's this sort of like, I just want the thing, and if I get the thing, I'll finally... There's a story that I tell that my sister hates that I tell this story. She's always like, okay, I've heard this story a million times, but it affected me a lot. When I was visiting them, when they're just visiting my sister and my nieces and nephews, they were little kids, so I don't fault them. This is not... I'm pre-apologizing to my sister because she's told me, like, okay, I've heard the story. So it's Christmas time. There's presents everywhere. The kids are like totally amped. So they're going through, taking their turns, opening presents, etc. And they're like, they're going as fast as they can. They're like tearing through presents, etc. Going around. And then finally, at the end, there's wrapping paper everywhere. There's gifts everywhere. And the kids say, okay, can we have another gift? And the parents are like, okay, that's it. Those are all the gifts that we have. And the kids are like, no, we want more. And that thrill of wanting was driving the whole process. The reason I tell this story so much is because I think everybody identifies. It's like, this is so much fun. I want this thing so much. I stay up all night long researching a thing, or, whatever. I really want this thing. And the wanting feels in a way very good, but it also has this sense of, at the end of it, I'll finally be relieved. Once I get the thing I really want, I'll finally be relieved. But so the kids want toys, they want this thing, and then at the end, they're surrounded by toys. And that's it. It's all over. And so the wanting has more momentum, but it can't be satisfied. So this a friend of mine, a monk, who's also a teacher, Soryu for All, who teaches at the Monastic Academy for the Preservation of Life on Earth, I think it is. It's in Vermont, highly recommended. All of their content is great. They have a YouTube channel. I'll put a link for it down below if you're watching the replay. He has a quote, which I remember he said, that wanting doesn't care if we're happy. It just wants, which I love that quote. And so what we have to look at is that we have a potential to be happy and fulfilled. However, our drives within us don't necessarily care. Wanting is one of those central drives. So why would our drives not care? All of the drives within us have one primary purpose, or they're sort of layers of drives really leaning towards one purpose. Sometimes I'll ask people, what do you think that purpose is in a class? And they'll say, survival. All of our instincts are for survival. And I'll say, nope, that's a secondary. It's actually not survival. The actual drive is to pass genetic material forward. That's the primary thing that all of our systems, all the wanting and the thing, and all of those are useful to the degree to which they can help us pass genetic material forward. Now, as modern humans, that might not be our primary personal interest, passing genetic material forward. So what do we do then with all these drives? And what if we want something very different than just passing genetic material forward? What if we actually want to feel fulfilled? What do we do then? Well, in that case, we actually have to sort of hotwire the system in a way that will be most likely to give us that fulfillment. And the way that we hotwire that system is through meditation and contemplation and nurture positive practices like the one we did today. And so that's the reason we want to shape our values. Having clear values and making decisions from those values is one of the highest predictors of having a fulfilling life. Are we living in alignment with our values? Relationship success is often based more on shared values than shared interests or shared sort of pop cultural references, which people usually think that's the thing that would most likely join them, is if they have a lot of things to talk about. But if they don't share values, it's not going to work. So we're trying to escape the gravity of our drives that really just want to pass genetic material forward. That's how we're designed. And cultivate those aspects of those drives that will be most likely to make us fulfilled. Well, which ones will make us fulfilled? We could say generically there could be some values, but for what about me specifically? What for me would make me feel fulfilled? Well, for that, I typically recommend that people get very, very clear on what their personal values are. I have an exercise for that. If you're watching this as a replay, I'll put the link right down below, but you can also just go right to our website, which is deepmindfulness.io/tools, and there's a values exercise there. I do this with every student. It's the first thing that I do with any student that I work with, along with the 15 essential meditations, which are probably also linked right below, or you can type links in the chat, ! Links, and you'll see all the links, including those 15. So getting clear on your values, breaking it down to 10. It's kind of an arbitrary number, but it's a good number to just keep it to, because a lot of people's difficulties are based on mismanaged, or either they do not focus on their values or they organize their values. There's this classic thing, which I think comes from Dale Carnegie, this guy who just talked about, how to be a good person. Classic, be a good person, dude. And he has this metaphor. Imagine you have a big jar and you have some material next to it, and you need to put the material into the jar. There are 3 materials. There are golf balls, there is marbles, and there's sand. So the first person comes up and is like, oh, this is pretty straightforward. They pour the sand into the jar, and the jar fills up X amount. Then they take the marbles and they pour those into the jar, and then they go to try to put the, golf balls, and maybe one can fit in there, but they don't really fit because the jar is effectively full. The next person comes along and says, well, let me try this a little bit differently. They go and they put the golf balls in the jar. Those fit fine. They put the marbles in the jar. Give a little shake. Those fit fine. They put the sand in the jar, and it goes in and fills all the little spaces in between. Well, now the little details are now spread out and organized around the bigger details. And so they fit. Everything can fit into the jar. And you can try this if you want. You can only do one. You can't do both. One way fits, one way does not fit. This is a beautiful physical metaphor because this is exactly how values work. If we do not focus on our values, our life is full, certainly. Life is very easily full, but we do not actually have the things that are the most important to us at the core of our experience, and all the little stuff, making sure our inbox is empty, or making all these little details end up being taking up all of our time and all of our attention. And that is pretty insufferable, pretty frustrating and painful in that way. So what do we do if we have our values, once we've done this values exercise, which again, I recommend for everyone. I also recommend that once you get it, what do you do with it? Once you get your values, you want to start making decisions based on those values, even small decisions. What do you want to do today? That's a pretty obvious decision. What do you want to, you have a decision to make it work. Do I stay at this job? Do I leave this job? What kind of meditation do I want to focus on? I was working with a new student, one-on-one student recently, and I won't disclose much detail. I will say, however, when I looked at their values, most of them were interpersonal, connection, friendship, community, making a contribution, these kind of things. And so I said, well, we might want to focus on meditations that are interpersonal. This is a pretty straightforward, path that you can take, is you have more of an interpersonal focus in your meditation. Because imagine you're like, well, I want awakening. That's really important. I want awakening. The question that I always ask is, one, maybe it's the same question, so it's not 2 questions, but in a sense is why. But really, the reason I'm asking why is I'm asking, what kind of life do you want after awakening? Because for most people, just the fact that awakening is possible seems like, oh my God, it's possible, so I have to do it, I want to do it, I crave that thing, right? I have a drive in that direction. But they don't look at, well, what kind of life do I want? Do I want a life that's deeply interpersonally connected? Do I want a life where I'm a sort of solo, cowboy type, where I'm off alone, just exploring the, fascinating aspects of the human mind? What do I want my life to be like? And then, once you get a sense of what you want life to be like, choosing meditation practices that lean in that direction. So here's an example of in that direction and not in that direction. You might have someone who pays attention to the breath. Hey, great meditation object, nothing wrong with the breath. I tend to, if it feels a little, I teach so many different ways of meditating, I tend to not focus on the breath so much because it feels like everyone else is already doing it, so might as well focus on something else. So I tend to focus on like the sensations of the hands or something else if I need something very simple for someone to pay attention to. But it's a great object of meditation. I've done many, many, many hours of focusing on the breath. Suppose you are focusing on the breath, but at the same time, you really want a meditation or you really want a life that is very interpersonally focused. Okay, well, whenever you're not doing the breath, you want to maybe focus on other people's experience. And on your experience with other people, on the interpersonal interaction. But what if you got very good at something else? What if you got very good at using emotion as the object of meditation? I don't want to say most people, but I'd say maybe a lot of people can't even tell what emotion is. They just, I don't know, it's like a thing. Well, that's very problematic generally. Let's just say that as a fact. But also, how are we going to know what we really want, what matters to us if we can't actually tell what emotion is as a body sensation? Emotion is definitely a body sensation. I won't get into it, but it's like just even the wiring of the brain is like it is. Puppies have emotion very clearly. That part of the brain is the middle part of the brain. It's not the part that reflects back. So we absolutely have body sensations which are emotional. So what if I paid attention to that as the object of meditation? And when I talked to another person, I just flipped back and forth between what's my emotional experience, what's my sense of what their emotional experience is based on their facial expression, based on the intonation of their voice, their body language, etc. What is the personal interaction? Grumbling tummy here. What is that experience? Now, that might seem sort of weird and formal, but imagine the difference of trying to do that. How connected are you going to feel in that conversation versus one where you're trying to pay attention to your breath and listen to what they're saying at the same time? And just as a caveat, what I just described, attending to my emotional experience and then their emotional experience, has a term. It's just called empathy. And this is a normal human experience. We're just exchanging back and forth. What's my experience? What's your experience? What if that became my object of meditation? Well, the likelihood is I'm going to be more tuned with my children, or more in tune with my community, more in tune with what's happening in these interactions. So that's an example of choosing the object of meditation, or the sort of type of meditation that's going to be more likely to lead you towards the life that you want post stream entry or post awakening. And for me, that's the most important, because there is not one generic awakening. And anyone who tells you that is typically talking about a single tradition, because often a single tradition has a way of awakening that sort of fits within that tradition. As everyone who's been here for very long knows, I teach in a metasystemic way, and so I'm teaching about how all these different systems interact and how they all view these different types of awakening. And even within most traditions, there are variations of what awakening is like, and how to move yourself in that way. So let's recap real quick. The reason we do our values is because if we don't, our default is to wander around scared and confused and competitive and anxious. That is the human default. Let's see. How do we do this? Well, we get clear on what our values are and start making decisions based on those and letting everything else fall into place. Keeping our values at the core of as many decisions as we can make, small ones and eventually big ones. But doing it in small places is actually really, really helpful. How can I have what I'm looking for in terms of my values right now? And then finally, making an effort to make decisions based on these values and shaping our practice and shaping the way we relate to the world in terms of our values is the most likely thing to bring us towards fulfillment. The final story that I want to tell is about somebody I helped. It was a friend who I was helping coach along with another friend who wanted to put on a off-Broadway production, really wanted to do this and was like, this is something I want. I said, great. Let's talk about why. This is another great thing. If you know what you want, just look at why. Why do you want that? Why do you want that? And finally, after working with him on the values for a while, he said, I want to connect with people. I want to show people my acting, chops. I really love acting. I want to share this art form with people. And I want to have the live interaction with these people so we really can work and connect and have that feeling. Those things together would make me feel very fulfilled. Great. Those are all the things I want to hear. What things would actually, why are you actually doing this? When we started the conversation, it was very technical. Okay, if I want this to do an off-Broadway thing, it's like a lot of work, and how do I raise the money, and how do I, all these little details, which were fine, but I want to get to the values. By the end of it, he's like, these are the things that I want, and me and the person next to him sort of looked at each other, and we're like, why don't you go, we're in New York City, why don't you go do a monologue or a piece in the park? Immediately, like today, instead of this thing that is like, potentially going to take, years, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Why don't you do that thing today? And it was sort of a revelation. You can have the thing you want right now. It just doesn't look like this particular shape that we're thinking of it in. And often we have these things, I have to have X, Y, and Z. And for me, when I have that drive, I have to have, like it has to be, I've lost the values. It's now a thing where I am driven by some image of what it's supposed to be like, and I'm totally divorced from my actual values. So returning to what are my values, what do I actually need, what do I actually want? So often it's very easy to actually bring myself towards what I want and need much more quickly than the image of what I think it's supposed to be. So that, my friends, is how I would direct someone or help someone or support someone to find a path that would make them feel fulfilled. Hopefully that was fun and interesting. And now we're going to open it up to questions. There's one question here. Do values change? Absolutely. Values 100% change. And that's why we're always actually evaluating our values themselves. Do these values fit? So you go through your values and what I typically will do is say, one word with a sentence that defines them. Make 10 of those. And you're just filtering through. I don't know, okay, make this decision. Some of these values are relevant to this decision, some are not. The places where there's conflict, okay, I really want success, but I also want a lot of time with my family. Well, there's a little bit of a conflict there. So you're going to have to attend to how do you create that balance in your life, right? That's going to be a place where you're going to need to put a little extra attention. And the last thing I'd say is, as far as values changing, I talk a lot about internal family systems as a way of navigating our unconscious material and a way of breaking through this stuff. I really love that. It's one of the things I love doing with people very directly. It's a powerful process. I recommend it for anyone. If you can find a practitioner or a therapist who does that, I highly recommend it. It's one of the few psychological processes that assumes that we have a sort of awake awareness at our core, that's who we actually are versus all these different warring parts of us. The way I look at it is that each of these drives within us, the drive to get the new phone or the drive to be liked on Instagram or whatever the drive is, if we take away the pain of that part and the job that part thinks it has, I've got to make myself popular, I've got to be liked, and look at why is that? Why does that part of me, and this is typically we'll do this with the support of someone else, but we can do some self-therapy in that way. What is it this part really, really needs? And often that part just needs, let's say, safety or connection. I just want to feel connected. I'm afraid that if I'm not liked on this social media platform, then I'll just be scared and alone. Well, it sounds like you don't want to be alone. You would like to feel connected. You like to feel support. So right now you can just go immediately and start feeling connected. If we get those needs met, we're not going to need to do the maladaptive behavior, like, use drugs because we want to have a spiritual experience. Well, we can do that in meditation, or judge people and be angry because we want to feel like we belong, right? We can do that by working on trying to belong, have a sense of belonging. So our values are the parts of us that have various drives without their pain, without their suffering. So as we shed that pain and suffering, as we sort of move through that material, our values will absolutely change 100%. We'll get so much clearer, like, I don't like this. I'm not available for this kind of experience. And that is how we shape a life that's more and more fulfilling over time. Exalted Bro asked the following question.
What if some values come from the ego, fame, money, pleasure, etc.? Should those be left unconsidered? Kind of paradoxical to consider those being compatible with not existing as a self.
Here's the thing this gets into IFS. This is the thing, that's a great question. We want to look at every drive within us as wholesome in its nature. Not necessarily in its execution, but in its nature. So let's look at that. What were some of the examples you gave? Fame, right? Let's say the drive for fame is wholesome. Let's just assume that it's wholesome rather than, oh, you want fame and money? Oh, what's wrong with you, right? Because money's an easier one. People want money for different reasons. One person wants money because they want to look flashy and they want to be seen by people. But let's assume that even that is a wholesome value, right? I want to be seen by people. I want people to look at me and think of me as important. So let's just hold on a minute and say, what if that is an okay value? Someone else might want money because they want security. In our society, security is a much more acceptable sort of drive. But let's assume that they're both okay. If the person wants security, then they can do a dozen things in this current moment to find a sense of security, along with getting their finances in shape. If somebody wants that sense of being looked at as important, as being the center of attention, we actually do prize that in many aspects of our society, but we do that through praising people who are very talented, and we're like, oh yeah, that's fine, yeah, sure, we'll all look at you, we don't mind that. But we typically, if somebody's just like, I just want you to look at me, we're like, well, that's a little weird. If you can look at what is it about that would make you feel fulfilled? What is it about that would actually help you feel more fulfilled? And assume that is actually a wholesome value. There's no longer this I'm going to erase this part of myself, because that's often what we do. So let's say fear. Let's use fear as a good example. We usually say, oh, feel that fear, but push that fear aside and do the thing you really want. So the part of you that is ambitious gets heard, and the part of you that's like, hey, but I'm scared. This is scary. That part just gets smashed down. Now, a very clear example of this is what's in meditation is called the dark night. That is a very gurgly belly. Okay, I hear you. So a very clear example of this is something in meditation which is called the dark night. In the dark night experience, what's occurring is that there's a conflict between two different parts. One part tastes and is desperate for freedom. It's like, I feel this freedom, I need it. There's this other part over here that really knows and craves safety. And so these two start to conflict. These two start to fight with each other. And the freedom one says, safety, go to hell, get out of here. And the safety one's like, hell no, you can't erase me. So it comes back with all of these, difficult things, because these two things are fighting, and it feels like this existential sort of war within us. Ultimately, what we need to do is meet the needs of both of these parts. And until we can meet the needs of the part that really wants safety and stability, this is just going to be a total war continuously. So we always want to assume that any drive within us, that the root of it is wholesome. It's the execution that could be problematic. An example of this that I often will say is someone says, I want to feel excited, I want to feel a spiritual connection, and I want to have lots of energy. Okay, those are all fine values. And it's like, so therefore I'm going to try crack cocaine. It's like, no. Everything was good up until that execution point. So usually, even the worst of worst people, you can look at, this is a very extreme example, so forgive me for this, it's hyperbolic, but even if you look at people who are like openly, like white nationalists, a rising problem in our country, at the root, the likelihood is they probably want to feel a sense of belonging. They want to feel a sense that they have purpose in the world. They want to feel a sense that they, that their experience is meaningful and understood. All of these are very understandable experiences, and the only way we're actually ever going to get through this conflict is not like try to delete these people. And I think that for a while we thought there's so few of them, we'll just use the delete technique and that's going to work. But we're starting to realize there's a lot of people who have those drives and have been sort of tricked into thinking the resolution to those drives is like some vague form of like, I don't know, like a white ethno-state or some super insane stuff. So ultimately, though, if those drives are met, just a need for connection, a need for community, a need to be understood, then the likelihood that they'll be seeking those in these horribly violent ways goes down dramatically. That said, that doesn't mean that we just let people do whatever they want. We have to recognize that there is something about that that is wholesome, and the execution itself is not going to work. Jamler says, is it not a drive towards self-transcendence? You said it. That's a little bit of a problem. Is it not a drive? I don't know what it is. Is it not a drive towards self-transcendence that is wholesome in itself, and resistance is the core? Oh, you're talking about the dark night. Yeah, but the thing is, we have numerous drives. So the drive towards transcendence is totally wholesome, and the drive for safety is totally wholesome. And at some point, they're going to come in conflict, or they can. And typically in meditation, we call that the dark night. So maybe I'll do an entire stream based on that relationship of a part that wants freedom and a part that wants safety, and working with that and working through the dark night through that perspective. Maybe that'll be cool. Although I have an entire course that I think is sort of focused around that called the Progressive Shinsight, which you are all very welcome to participate in. Just go to my website and deepmindfulness.io, and I think it's going to be under events or POS. I think it's going to be on my website, deepmindfulness.com/POS. Oh no, sorry, let's do that again. My editor, I'm doing another take here so my editor can have this. You can find out all about that course at deepmindfulness. Wow. You can find all about that course at deepmindfulness.io/POS. And that's where that course is at. We're going to launch a new version of that course very soon. So I encourage you to participate. That's where we're going to discuss the relationship of the progressive insight with Shinzen's material, and how we can use this sort of movement towards unconditioned non-duality as a way of shaping our path in awakening. Any other questions, comments, queries, curiosities, or concerns before we find our way into the ether? And if not, that's no big deal. Let me check Discord to see if there's anyone hanging out. Nope. We're good. Okay, folks, what else? Anything else before we hit the bricks? Lovely to be here with you all. We're going to be back here in fewer than 48 hours. It's now time for me to go play with the puppy. Amused Dave says, love the stream. Love that you're here, Dave. Very happy you're here. I do nothing to outreach this stream. I don't tell anybody. I don't send out emails. Probably should. I definitely should. So if you know anyone who might like this, let them know. And that is always appreciated. Folks, great to be here with you. Let's, for fun, put up, for our last few seconds here, a little Rita Natarova special here. I want to find more of her paintings, and we'll go from there. So, folks, thank you, as always. Let's put on some music right now and listen to that music, and then talk about the themes for today. So, listen to this. Folks, we're going to be back here in fewer than 48 hours to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Anything at all. Lovely, as always, to be here with you. In this particular moment, notice that the mind is dividing the world. The mind is shaping it and cutting it up. We just had a lovely discussion, and maybe it's trying to shape and manage the world in terms of the understanding that you've just developed. Maybe that's what's happening. So notice that mind is dividing the world into pieces, and invite it to the overall experience. And as you do that, recognize that, of course, this is how things occur. You can say to that experience, whatever experience you're having, of course, inviting it to the overall sensory experience, inviting it into awareness. And in that way, you can bring this practice into every detail of your life. I challenge you to bring this into as much of your day as possible. Folks, as always, practice well, take care of each other, have fun, and we'll see you all very, very soon.